Okay, so let's go to the main word that is represented in the name of this video and also the name of the book. Nepoualtzitzin. Nepoualtzitzin, it's a Nahuatl word that is formed by 3 parts. The first part, or the first root, is ne, that means somebody. The second one is powal, that means to count. And the third part is repeated, as you can see, tzitzin, which means a diminutive, a reverential. That would mean small, similar elements. So we add these 3 parts together, we will have something like somebody that counts with small, similar elements. And you will ask yourselves, which are these small, similar elements? Well, the next slide will be clear for you. The Nepoualtzitzin, it's an abacus. It's the Mesoamerican abacus, with a structure of 91 little beads. These are the small, similar elements. So let's see the structure of this abacus. As you can see in this diagram, we have 7 columns and 13 rows. So if we multiply 7 by 13, that makes 91. But what is 91? Or why 91 is an important number? If you see the next slide, I will give you a hint. As you can see, the Nepoualtzitzin is related intimately with nature's cycles. If we have 91, that means a quarter of a year, which means one season, such as spring, summer, fall, or winter. If we double that number, we will have 182. 182 days are the number of days required to have the complete cycle of the corn, from the time we plant the seed in the soil to the time we have the complete crop. If we have 91 multiplied by 3, then we will have 273. So that means 3/4 of a year, which of course means the human gestation. And 4 times will be 364. That means a complete year around the earth, plus 1 day and a quarter, of course. So as you can see, this Mesoamerican abacus that apparently is just for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing is based on human and nature cycles. On the next slide, you will see the same structure of the Nepoualtzitzin, but related to the Mayan counting system that, as you know, they use dots and bars. So the left side of the abacus will be representing dots, each one with a value of 1, and the right side of the Nepoualtzitzin will be using bars that are equivalent to 5. So in the next slide, you will see how it will be represented. Dots to the left, bars to the right. But you have to remember that this is a vigesimal system, which means counting from 20 by 20 and not from 10 by 10. This is very interesting, for example, in some of the Mayan languages. In Mexico, for example, in Chiapas, one language is the Celtal, in which number 20 is said winik or vinik, but also a human being is called winik. The human being is a vigesimal system. Why? Because of the simple reason that we have 10 fingers and 10 toes. There are some reminiscences of the vigesimal system in other languages, such as French, in which, as you know, in order to say 80, 80, that means 4 times 20, you can see clearly the vigesimal system here. And in order to say 90, 90, which means 4 times 20 plus 10, you can also see the same structure of the Mayan mathematics. So here are some examples of the ancient abacuses, such as this one from Cholula, Puebla. Some of the beads were made of gold or obsidian or jade, and sometimes also made of seashells. There were other abacuses, such as this one from the area of Tabasco and the Gulf of Mexico, which were made with a basis of metal. And the next one in the slide you can see one with a base of leather from the highlands of Mexico. In the next slide we see a recreation of how it might have been used. And of course the use was for several purposes. One, very simple, like counting, adding, subtracting, multiplying, but also the other one, as keeping a close track of the orbits of the main planets of the solar system. But this Mayan abacus is very versatile because we can also use it in the decimal system. In the book, I have a complete manual of how to use it both in the vigesimal system and in the decimal system. Some of you know that many cultures have their own abacus, such as the Japanese, known as the Soroban, the Russian abacus, that is called the Shioti, the Chinese abacus, that is known as the Suan-Pan. Well, the structure of the Nepoualtzitzin is much more similar to the Japanese one, with 1s and 5s. Another important aspect of the Nepoualtzitzin and its relationship to the cycles is to analyze, for example, the right side of the abacus, which has 39 elements. Now suppose you have an equilateral triangle with 13 little dots or circles by side. If you see, the complete number of little circles will be 91. That, as you know, is a season. Now imagine that we have a tetrahedron with triangles on each one of its faces. So that will mean that we have 91 times 4, which is 364. Now let's analyze, for example, another system that is also related to the right side of the Mayan abacus. Now we're going to see it in an horizontal position so that it's clearer to you. This system is called the macaque, and it's a perimetric system. So if we apply this system to the abacus, that means that we're going to count just the little beads or dots that are around the right side of the abacus, or now that you're seeing horizontally, the upper side of the abacus. And as you can see, the number of spaces is exactly 28. That, as you know, is the lunar cycle. So this represents the full cycle of the moon from the new moon, the crescent, the full moon, and the waning moon. Now, let's go to the left side of the Nepoualtzitzin, which has 52 elements that now you're familiar with. That is the cycle of the Pleiades. So let's see. According to Mesoamerican culture, there are 7 cardinal points, not 4, which means north, south, east, west. The center point is the 5th point. The zenith point is number 6. And the 7th point is the nadir point, an imaginary point down below the earth. So this is very interesting, as you can notice, because there are special numbers that in many cultures are good luck or bad luck or ritual or sacred numbers, such as 7 and 13. The number of beads of the Mayan Abacus. So why are they so sacred or ritual numbers? Because they're related to the cycles of nature. Nature is sacred, nature is wise, and each 7 days, multiples of 7, multiples of 13, we find cycles that are repeated and repeated. Something very interesting to notice, for example, is that all the orbits of the solar system are multiples of 7 or 13. Here in the next slide, there's a beautiful evidence of this culture that is completely consistent in all of its aspects. Let's see. Around the Gulf of Mexico, there is a dance, a ritual dance, that is known here as the flying humans, la danza de los voladores. There are 5 dancers. One that represents the center point, that is the sun, and the other 4 that are the ones that go around a huge pole. Before climbing the tree trunk, they dance 7 times around the pole. 4 dancers dance 7 times around the pole. The one that is in the center does not move. And of course, as you can see, 7 by 4 is 28. The lunar cycle, 28 days. So they climb up the trunk that sometimes is about 30 meters high, and in the descension, the 4 dancers go 13 times around the tree trunk, which means 13 by 4, 52. That, as you know, is the cycle of the Pleiades. Now, another aspect of the Mayan mathematics is the use of the Mayan Board, which is simpler than the Mayan Abacus. And as you can see in the next slide, it is just a board with squares on it, that each one of the levels of the board has a different association with the numbers. So for example, level 1, 1 dot is 1, and 1 bar is 5, as you know. But since this is a vigesimal system, on the next level, 1 dot will be multiplied by 20. So that means 1 by 20 is 20. And 1 bar, that usually is 5, is now multiplied by 20, which results as 100. On the third level, we have the same 1 dot and 1 bar, but now multiplied 20 by 20. So 1 by 20 by 20 means 400. And 1 bar, that is 5 multiplied by 20 by 20, means 2,000. And the same thing you can see, for example, from right to left, from the right upper corner to the left, with the same equivalence. So within this board, you can also make all the mathematical operations. This system of the board, I find it easier to teach, especially with small kids. And later, we'll pass on to the abacus that requires a more elevated structure in your mind. So in the book also, in the second part, I also present the Mayan board and several examples of additions, subtractions, multiplications, and divisions, using this simple board as a child's game. So, in order to wrap up, the first section of my book is dedicated to the theoretical fundaments that speak about astronomy, mathematics, geometry, but also philosophy, the knowledge of nature's cycles, as the basis of the Mesoamerican calendars, and of course this beautiful discipline known as archaeoastronomy, that is the relationship between the archaeological sites and the orientation of the buildings in order to watch certain astronomical bodies. And the second part of the book is, as I told you before, the manual of how to use the Mayan abacus and how to use the Mayan board, both in the decimal and vigesimal systems. If you want to know more about all this wonderful knowledge, you can buy the book in Spanish called La Sabiduría del Contar en el Mundo Mesoamericano, elementos teóricos y prácticos de la matemática prehispánica. I am now working on the translation of the book, and this is available in all of these different sites. Available also in hardcover, softcover, or as an ebook. But if you want to learn more, I also teach some workshops. For example, of pre-Hispanic symbology and cosmovision, which deals with all the calendars, using the Mayan abacus and board, which is dedicated specifically to the math part of the culture, and also this wonderful workshop of the Sunstone Wisdom, in which we analyze each one of the circles and meanings of the sunstone. Here's my email and my name, so if you want to have more information, feel free to send me an email. Thank you.